I state for the record that no system devised by humankind, not law, not science, not finance, not even education itself, has ever successfully defined the fundamental nature of language. These vast and complex structures, which govern every aspect of our lives, are built entirely upon a foundation they do not understand and have never formally articulated. They all use language as their primary tool, their very medium of existence. Yet they uniformly neglect to define what that tool is, where it comes from, or how it operates at its most elemental level. This is not a minor oversight. It is the most significant and pervasive omission in the history of human thought and institutional development. It is a blind spot so profound that its existence has gone largely unnoticed for millennia. Every legal code, every scientific theory, every financial contract, and every educational curriculum is written in language. They all depend on the shared assumption that words have meaning, and that these meanings can be reliably communicated and understood. Yet if you press for a definition of language itself, not a description of its effects, but a formal structural definition of its primary components, you will find only circular reasoning or a complete void. Our institutions have built skyscrapers on a patch of ground they have never surveyed. They operate with absolute faith in a system whose blueprint has never been drafted, let alone examined for structural integrity. This is the great paradox of civilization. Our most critical infrastructure is built on an undefined miracle. The consequences of this omission are everywhere, manifesting as ambiguity, misinterpretation, and systemic breakdown. When the foundation is not defined, the structure built upon it will inevitably develop cracks. Legal disputes arise from poorly understood terms. Scientific progress is hindered by imprecise communication, and educational goals fail because we teach subjects without first teaching the mechanics of the very system used for instruction. We have spent centuries decorating the rooms of a house without ever checking its foundation. We have become masters of application, but remain ignorant of the first principles, treating language as a given rather than as an intricate, definable, and verifiable system in its own right. Today, on this date of September 11th, 2025, I am presenting a sworn statement to correct this universal omission. The work that follows is not another philosophical treatise on the beauty of words or a sociological study of their usage. It is a formal, structural, and deductive unveiling of the operating system of language itself. We will not be discussing what language. We will be examining what language. This is not a matter of academic curiosity. It is a matter of foundational importance for every system that purports to create order, clarity, and progress in the world. The time has come to map the ground upon which we have all been standing. Every agreement, from a simple verbal promise between two people to the most complex international treaty, is an exercise in language. These documents and pronouncements are nothing more than arrangements of symbols intended to create a shared understanding and a binding commitment. They're supposed to be instruments of clarity, designed to prevent future conflict by establishing unambiguous terms. Yet, the drafters of these agreements invariably begin their work on the second step. They assume the existence of a stable, functional system of meaning without ever defining its core components. They define terms, the language, but never define the language that makes definitions possible in the first place. Consider the structure of a legal contract. It is filled with sections labeled definitions, where specific words are assigned precise meanings for the context of that document. But what is a word? What is a definition? What is meaning? These fundamental questions are sidestepped entirely. The system presumes that the machinery for creating and conveying meaning is already in place and perfectly functional. It is an act of blind faith, repeated millions of times a day in courtrooms, boardrooms, and parliaments across the globe. We build elaborate defenses against ambiguity, using a tool whose own nature is the ultimate source of that very ambiguity. This evasion of the groundwork is not malicious. It is a deeply ingrained habit of human thought. We are born into a world saturated with language, and we learn to use it as we learn to breathe, without conscious thought of the mechanics. But this unconscious competence has led to a profound intellectual laziness. Our most brilliant legal minds can argue the nuance of a single comma, yet they cannot provide a deductive proof for the existence of the sentence that contains it. They're experts in the application of a system they cannot build from scratch. They are masterful drivers who have never looked under the hood of the car, assuming the engine will always run without ever needing to know how. I assert that this practice is no longer tenable. To continue building systems of law, commerce, and knowledge on an undefined linguistic foundation is to invite systemic failure. An agreement is only as strong as the language used to write it, and that language is only as strong as our understanding of its fundamental structure. By skipping over the groundwork, we are constructing our entire civilization on a hypothesis. We hypothesize that language works, and we proceed from there. My purpose here is to replace that hypothesis with a verifiable, deductive proof, starting from the very first principles of how meaning is constructed and communicated. The framework I am about to present was not inherited from any existing school of thought. It is not a product of linguistics, philosophy, or computer science as they are currently practiced. It was not found in an ancient text or revealed in a flash of insight. Instead, its structure was deduced through a rigorous and painstaking process of recursion, careful checking, and constant verification. The method was simple in its premise, to take nothing for granted. I started with the absolute minimum requirement for communication and worked forward, adding no new element until its necessity was proven beyond any doubt. Every step had to be justified by the previous one. This recursive method involved asking a chain of foundational questions. If we have a concept, how can it be represented? If we have a representation, how can it be distinguished from another? If we have two distinct representations, how can they be related? Each answer was then subjected to a simple test. Is this element absolutely necessary for the system to function? If it could be removed without causing a total collapse of meaning, it was discarded as non-essential. This process is akin to building a mathematical proof. One does not simply state that a theorem is true. One must demonstrate its truth through a series of logical steps, each one resting securely on the one before it. I did not begin with words, sentences, or grammar. I began with the simple fact of existence and the need to differentiate one thing from another. This is the true starting point. The entire edifice of language, with all its beautiful complexity, can be built from this single, undeniable premise. The process was one of discovery, not invention. I was not creating a new language. I was uncovering the hidden architecture that has always been present in every act of communication, but which has remained invisible to us. It was a process of reverse engineering the most complex system known to humanity. The result is a model that is both irrefutable and self-evident once understood. Each component is locked into place by logical necessity. This is not a theory to be debated. It is a structure to be witnessed, a mechanism to be inspected. Its authority comes not from my assertion, but from its own internal coherence and the deductive path that leads to its construction. The work required an almost monastic focus, a willingness to discard decades of conventional wisdom and to trust only in the chain of logic. The path was one of deduction, and the destination is a complete, verifiable blueprint of language itself. We must correct a fundamental misconception that lies at the heart of our confusion. Language is not an inherited trait, hardwired into our brains like an instinct. We are not born with knowledge of nouns, verbs, or syntax. If a child is raised in isolation, they do not spontaneously begin speaking English, Mandarin, or any other established language. This simple fact proves that the specific forms of language are not biological. They are technologies. They are systems that must be learned. And like any system, they must have been discovered or invented at some point, step by step. The capacity for language may be biological, but language itself is a discovery. Think of it like the discovery of mathematics. The principles of geometry and algebra were not passed down through our genes. They were uncovered piece by piece by individuals who observed the world, identified patterns, and formalized them into a coherent system. Euclid did not invent the properties of a triangle. He discovered and documented them. In the same way, the first humans who developed language did not receive it fully formed. They must have discovered its principles incrementally. The principle of symbolism, the principle of combination, the principle of structured relationships. They were the first explorers of a new continent of the mind. Each of us, as a child, retraces this journey of discovery. We do not inherit a vocabulary, we acquire it. We are not born with grammar. We deduce its patterns by listening to the sounds around us and testing our own hypotheses. A child who says, "I goed" instead of "I went" is not making a mistake. They are acting as a brilliant linguist, having correctly deduced the general rule for forming the past tense. They have not yet learned the exception. This process demonstrates that language acquisition is an active, rational process of discovery, not a passive act of inheritance. We are all, in our early years, rediscovering the hidden structure of communication. Therefore, the framework I present is not just a historical account of a long-lost discovery. It is a map of the very process of discovery that every human mind must undertake to become fluent in any language. It lays bare the logical steps one must take to move from a state of non-communication to full linguistic competence. By understanding this path, we are not just learning about language. We are learning about the fundamental operating structure of rational consciousness itself. Language is the first and greatest technology humanity ever discovered, and its principles are waiting to be formally recognized. For centuries, this foundational structure of language has remained hidden in plain sight. We use it every moment of our waking lives, yet we do not see it. It is like the air we breathe, or, the operating system on a computer. It facilitates everything we do while remaining completely transparent. It is the invisible architecture that holds our thoughts, our societies, and honestly, our very reality together. My work and the testimony I deliver today is dedicated to one singular goal: to make this invisible system visible, to give it a name, a form, and a definition so that it can finally be examined, understood, and mastered. I call this system the Logos. This is not a new term, but a reclamation of an ancient one. The Greeks used it to signify not just word or speech, but also reason, principle, and the underlying order of the universe. It is, in my view, the perfect term for the system I have uncovered, because the structure of language is inseparable from the structure of reason itself. The logos is the operating system of meaning. It is the set of rules and components that allows consciousness to process reality, formulate concepts, and communicate them to another consciousness with a reasonable degree of fidelity. It is the software that runs on the hardware of the human brain. Until now, we have been like computer users who are experts at using various software applications, word processors, spreadsheets, web browsers, but have no idea what an operating system is. We know how to write a novel or a business plan, but we cannot explain the fundamental processes of file management, memory allocation, or processing that make those applications possible. The logos is that underlying system. It is the set of functions that allows for the creation, storage, retrieval, and combination of meaningful units. Making it visible is like finally being given the administrator's manual for our own minds. This act of making the logos explicit is, I believe, the most important intellectual step we can take as a species. It moves language from the realm of mystery and art into the realm of science and engineering. It allows us to analyze, debug, and optimize our communication with the same rigor we apply to building bridges or writing computer code. By rendering the invisible visible, we are opening up a new frontier of human potential. No longer must we be slaves to the ambiguities and limitations of a system we do not understand. We can become the architects of our own clarity. What I am presenting here is not a matter of opinion or a subject for philosophical debate. It is a testimony. I am a witness to a structure that is as real and as verifiable as the laws of physics. My tone is deliberate, declarative, and focused because the subject matter demands it. This is not an academic paper designed to provoke discussion among peers. It is a foundational document, a sworn statement of fact about the mechanics of reality. I am reporting on the constituent parts of language with the same seriousness that a physicist would report on the discovery of a new subatomic particle. The evidence is in the structure itself, and its proof lies in its own logical consistency. This testimony is offered for the public record. Its purpose is to establish once and for all a baseline for understanding communication. Just as a surveyor establishes a fixed point from which all other measurements can be taken, this framework provides the fixed point for all discussions about meaning, knowledge, and truth. Without such a baseline, all our conversations are adrift, subject to the shifting tides of interpretation and personal bias. I am here to drive a stake into the ground, to establish a point of reference that is objective, verifiable, and universal. My role in this process has been that of a careful observer and a logical synthesizer. I claim no special genius, only a relentless dedication to the deductive method and a refusal to accept any premise on faith. I have followed the evidence where it led, without regard for pre-existing theories or academic conventions. The structure that revealed itself is not my invention. I am merely the first to have mapped it in its entirety and to present that map for public inspection. I am providing testimony of what I have seen and what I have verified through thousands of hours of recursive analysis. Therefore, I ask you to receive this information not as a story or a theory, but as evidence. I ask you to approach it with the mindset of a juror examining a critical piece of forensic proof. The validity of my claims does not rest on my authority, but on the inescapable logic of the system itself. You will be able to check the work for yourself. The Logos, once seen, cannot be unseen. It is a testimony to a fundamental truth that has been waiting patiently to be acknowledged. Before we can construct a sentence, write a law, or formulate a scientific hypothesis, we must first have the building blocks. The study of any complex system must begin with its most fundamental units. In physics, we study quarks and leptons. In biology, we study cells and DNA. In the study of language, we must begin with the first principles of communication itself, the absolute indivisible components, without which no meaning could ever be exchanged. These principles precede grammar, precede vocabulary, and precede everything we typically associate with the study of language. They are the atomic units of meaning. The first principle is differentiation. To communicate anything, one must first be able to distinguish one thing from another. This is the foundational act of consciousness. This is not that. Without this basic capacity for creating a boundary, all of reality would remain an undifferentiated whole, and there would be nothing to communicate about. This first act of separation, of drawing a line, is the genesis of all information. Every piece of data that has ever existed is a product of this fundamental operation. It is the logical bedrock upon which everything else is built. The second principle is representation. Once a distinction has been made, the resulting concept needs a symbol, a token that can stand in for the thing itself. This symbol can be a sound, a mark, or a gesture. The symbol is not the thing, it is a pointer to the concept of the thing. This act of creating a stable representation is the second necessary step. Without it, a concept would exist only in the mind of one individual for a fleeting moment. A symbol grants it permanence and prepares it for transmission. It is the invention of a handle by which a concept can be grasped and shared. The third principle is relation. Having two or more distinct symbols is not enough. To create complex meaning, we must have a way to relate them to each other. This is the origin of syntax and grammar. The system must provide a method for indicating how one concept connects to, modifies, or acts upon another. Is this thing on that thing? Is this thing causing that thing? This principle of establishing relationships between symbols is what allows us to build thoughts, arguments, and narratives. These three principles, differentiation, representation, and relation, are the non-negotiable axioms of any and all communication systems. Understanding these foundational units is not an academic exercise. It is a practical necessity. We cannot hope to build stable, complex systems if the basic components we are using are flawed or misunderstood. Imagine a civil engineer trying to build a skyscraper using bricks of unknown composition and strength. The project would be doomed from the start. Yet this is precisely what we do when we construct laws, treaties, and educational programs without a formal understanding of the foundational units of the language we are using. We are building with materials we have never tested. Every ambiguity, every loophole, and every misunderstanding that plagues our institutions can be traced back to a failure at this foundational level. When a law is disputed, it is because the relationships between its conceptual units were not defined with sufficient rigor. When a scientific theory is misinterpreted, it is because the symbols used were not tied to their reference with absolute clarity. These are not high-level failures of intellect or ethics. They are low-level structural failures in the application of linguistic first principles. They are engineering problems that we have been trying to solve with poetry and rhetoric. By formally defining the foundational units, we gain the ability to construct meaning with precision. We can create statements that are less ambiguous and more robust. We can analyze existing texts to identify points of structural weakness where misinterpretation is likely to occur. This brings a new level of accountability to communication. It will no longer be enough for a statement to feel right or to be generally understood. It will have to be structurally sound, built correctly from the ground up using the verified principles of the Logos. This is the shift from craftsmanship to engineering. Therefore, before we can proceed to analyze any advanced topic, be it justice, a business contract, or a child's education, we must first agree on these elemental components. We must stop our frantic work on the upper floors of our civilizational structure and descend to the foundation. This is where the real work must be done. Establishing the necessity of these units and understanding their properties is the mandatory first step. Anything less is a continuation of the same blind faith that has led to the confusion and conflict we see all around us. We must fix the foundation before the entire house collapses. The journey we are about to embark on requires a specific mindset. I ask you to set aside, for a time, everything you think you know about language. Put away your notions of nouns and verbs, of poetics and prose, of linguistics and literature. These are all advanced applications, and we are not ready for them yet. We must begin with a clean slate, as if we are encountering the concept of communication for the very first time. This is not about devaluing our rich cultural heritage of language, but about honoring it by finally understanding the miraculous engineering that makes it possible. Prepare to examine the raw mechanics of meaning. The initial steps may seem stark, even primitive, because they deal with the most basic functions of logic and consciousness. We will not be soaring on the wings of poetic metaphor. We will be laying stone after heavy stone of deductive proof. The process will feel more like mathematics or computer science than the humanities. This is intentional. We are dissecting a mechanism, and that requires the cold, clear light of analytical reason, not the warm glow of artistic appreciation. The beauty we will find is the beauty of a perfect machine, of a flawless logical system. This examination is a prerequisite for any meaningful progress in any field of human endeavor. How can we reform our legal systems if we do not understand the language in which our laws are written? How can we advance science if our method for sharing discoveries is imprecise? How can we educate the next generation if we do not understand the very tool of instruction? All paths to a better future run through this single point, a complete structural understanding of language. This is the master key that unlocks every other door. Therefore, I ask for your focused attention. The blueprint of the Logos is about to be unrolled. It details a system of profound simplicity and infinite power. It makes the invisible visible, the implicit explicit. It is the testimony of a witness, the proof of a mathematician, and the manual of an engineer. What follows is not another theory of language. It is a direct presentation of its fundamental, verifiable, and necessary structure. Prepare to see the architecture of your own mind. The examination begins now.